Hi, welcome to this podcast. So I have with me three guests who are, joining us to talk about development economics and social sector as such in the context of India. So first, I have with me Arvind Ilaraman, who is pursuing his PhD in human development from University of Chicago. Welcome to this podcast, Arvind.
Thank you, Manhar. It's a pleasure to join you guys.
Yeah, thank you. And then, we have with us Mehek Rastogi, who did her master's in poverty and development from United Kingdom. And since then, and this is like over the last 10 years, she has been working as a practitioner in the development, sector in India. Welcome to this podcast, Mehek.
Hi.
Yeah, and then we have with us Sanjukta Basu, who was actually my colleague, classmate, should I say, at Gokhale Institute in Pune, and then she went on to do her PhD in economics from Tulane University in the area of development economics, and is currently in Toronto, Canada, settled there. Yeah, welcome to this podcast, Sanjukta.
Hi, Manu. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, yeah,
Looking to
yeah,
this discussion.
yeah. So my first question, will be addressed to Sanjukta. Um, you know, we talk about development economics as a separate field in in economics. So could you, Sanjukta, give some insight into what is development economics about?
Sure. So, development economics is a subsidiary of the subject, which uses economics fundamentals in the social sector. So, it focuses on methods of promoting economic development, economic growth, structural changes, as well as improving the society as a whole. For instance, it can do this through the health sector, the education, workplace conditions, judicial, animal rights,
Mm-hmm.
human rights, and
Mm-hmm.
this can happen through the public as well as the private channels. Many of our Nobel laureates who have worked, who have been receiving their Nobel prizes in the field of development economics, have been working in the sector, in Indian sector, and been creating different models and theories which has improved our communities and society.
Okay. So okay, now you know what we understand by social sector or development sector. If you can come in, Mehek, now, and who are the different players in the social sector, Mehek.
Sure. So I think when we think about the development sector, right, what is it? It essentially is a sector that consists of individuals and organizations, all of which are basically working towards a cause. Right now, one might be like, okay, what are causes? Now, causes are what we have sort of defined as the sustainable development goals. So, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's larger poverty issues, the UN has sort of divided them into different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And all those people who are sort of working towards the sustainable development goals
Mm-hmm.
across different countries, they largely comprise of the development sector. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of who are the players, I think the players can largely be divided into three categories. Right, the first one I would say are NGOs, or social purpose organizations as we call them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is any organization that largely does not raise any profit, or does not actually hire anybody or create any profit of any kind. Right, they
Yeah.
raise funds towards a particular cause. These could be organizations which are working in capacity building, say, like, for example, the US. It could also be a research think tank like a Niti Aayog,
Uh-huh.
where they are working on different research topics towards a particular cause.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
The second kind of organizations within this larger space is your funding organizations. Like, for example, say a CSR. Reliance Foundation might be an example. These are all organizations that are funding what you would call an NGO, right? The
Okay.
third, I would say, is with regard to, say, philanthropies or retail giving. These are also funding organizations that contribute. So mostly, I would say the sector is divided into these two, three key players.
Okay. Okay. And uh, Sanjukta, if you can come in now and so what sort of policy domains, do these, organizations, work in, Sanjukta?
Okay, so that's a good question. So Mehek talked about a lot of these different players in the market, and we can say, in terms of the policy domains, they actually cover all aspects of the society. So remember, the idea is to enhance, upgrade, improve the society. So
Mhm.
everything which will help it improve and upgrade, and will be is part of the social sector or the domains. So some of the major policy domains include human rights, gender equality, senior citizen issues, poverty alleviation, health, education, animal rights, judicial system. You can just, this can go on and on. Out of them, some of the most common ones which receive a lot of attention are education, health, poverty alleviation. So as of 2015, most donors by Indians were targeted towards education, human services, and healthcare. So according to this report published by the CSR box in November 22,
Uh-huh.
they find that the top 301 Indian companies spent 36% of their total money on poverty alleviation, healthcare, and WASH. So WASH stands for water, sanitation, and hygiene. The next big allocation is that is 20% of this whole money goes to education and skills, 2% on gender equality, women empowerment. So I would also want to point out that 7% of the CSR money of this 301 top Indian companies goes to PM funds. So that is also included in this sector. And quoting some actual numbers, since Mehek mentioned Reliance, I would say Reliance spent 813 crore on CSR just last financial year. TCS, Data Consulting, paid 457 crore.
Okay.
Huge amount of money which goes into the sector.
So I have a query, so the CSR amount, let's say, the Reliance spend, over 800 crore. So that is pan India, right? So they are not targeting a particular state.
Yes, no, this is pan India
Yeah.
numbers. Pan India.
Correct. This is all.
Okay. Okay. And so the range of, scale, Sanjukta, if you can, give some, insight on that also of, the working world, this
Yeah,
organization.
sure.
kind of
So
work.
I can talk about some of the big numbers. So India has over 31 lakh NGOs, which is more than the double the number of schools and 250 times the number of government hospitals. This is as per the Bain report. Now, according to another article by Quads in 2014, India has one NGOs for every 600 people. Now, the amount of funding which goes into sector, it's really
One
huge.
second, one NGO for every 600 individuals.
Yes, and that's a 2014 number.
So do we have any, similar figure across the globe? Or are we,
It is one. So I don't have a number for the across the globe, but I would say that I can confidently say that this is the highest.
Correct.
Yeah, if we go back to the article by Quads 2014 that I'm quoting, they have it more in details in as per different countries, and
Okay.
India currently has a pretty high number. But then it makes sense given it has a huge population, right? So
Not
if
not
Huh?
only that, but the point is, we have a lot of inequality, so that sort of makes
right,
not
but
the yeah.
that's true, but our inequality is still not the highest. We actually will be surprised that US has a higher income inequality than India does. So a lot of our issues is, I mean, we can talk about these issues more in details and we will bring it up there. But here I just want to flag some of the numbers just to
Uh-huh.
get an idea of how big the sector is. So it's something that you really can't ignore the sector. So as per as of 2022, the
Uh-huh.
social sector funding has been rupees 17.5 lakh crore as per a
Okay.
DASRA report. So this is a 12% increase from the previous year. Now, another report published by CSR Box in November 2022, which says the top 301 Indian companies, just the top 301 Indian companies, have spent 12,182 crores in 2020 and 2021 financial year.
Okay. It's a
So
big.
it's a huge number which is going, it's a lot of money which is going in. But given the size of India, given our diversity, and given those things that you were pointing out earlier, it is not enough.
Not enough, especially for those states, which are actually lagging behind. I would say states which are on the eastern side, right? Bihar
Yeah.
and
No. I mean, one is to say states which are not enough, but also it is important for us to understand that we are talking of a very wide variety. There are 17 SDG goals that exist.
yes,
So when you're thinking about funding, you're thinking about climate change, you're thinking about
yes,
education, you're thinking
yes,
about health, you're thinking about, various other, you're thinking about livelihood.
yes,
So gender parity, mental health, there's just so much out there. And then with a population of 130 crore, that's a
yeah,
large number. So at any point, the scale that we have to address is very, very high. So maybe just combining it or talking about saying that, oh, other countries may not be good enough because the kind of scale that India has and the kind of problems that might be there is far greater than, say, what other countries might be facing.
yeah. You put it correctly. So I would bring in Arvind now to the conversation. Arvind, uh, if
Yeah.
you could give some ideas to where these organizations get their funding from, or you're talking of some big numbers in terms of the money which is involved, Arvind.
Yeah, definitely, Manhar. So, like Sanjukta mentioned earlier, the country's overall funding for non-profit sector has
Mm-hmm.
increased 12% from 10 lakh crore in 2021 to
Mm-hmm.
17.5 lakh crore in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you really want to look at the sources of funding, it comes from across the society. The biggest contributor to the non-profit sector in India is the government,
Okay.
be it the central government or the state government. And then you have people, the really rich business families, right? Or what we call as family philanthropy. A good example is the Tata Trust, right? And similarly, like Sanjukta again said, like the Birla family or the Ambani family, they all do their own set of social work.
Yes.
But that number has kind of either stayed flat or decreased over the years in the last 7 years.
Okay.
Uh, Government funding also, because of pandemic and other such factors, the state finances to the non-profit sector has also kind of reduced in the last few years. The only section of the funding that has actually seen a growth and that has seen continuous growth comes from the CSR, or the corporate social responsibility that we talk about, right?
Yes.
Where the corporates are asked to give 2% of their proceeds to the social sector beyond a certain turnover, right?
Okay.
This amount has definitely grown at the rate of close to 12 to 15% in the last 5 to 7 years.
So 1 second, so this growth, comes from medium, small and medium enterprises, because your first point you covered that the contribution of this conglomerate have actually been flat, so they've not. So where does this growth in CSR come from?
I think if you look at the state of the Indian economy in the last 7 to 8 years, right, we have seen a significant improvement in economic activity.
Yes.
We have seen a huge growth in venture capital money coming into new businesses in India.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Places like Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi have seen a huge growth in startups.
Yes.
And all these startups, in terms of evaluation and turnover, have been
Yes.
able to cross the threshold after which they have to give CSR very quickly.
Okay, got it. Yeah, okay, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So in the last 7 years, we have seen a huge increase in number of contributors potentially for the CSR category.
Yes.
So basically that growth is corresponding to the growth of the Indian economy as a whole, to simply put.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of briefly is a brief picture of how funding comes into non-profit sector in India. But to put simply though, I think the focus now should be more on these ultra high net worth individuals and business family philanthropies to
Yes.
increase the money they are giving. So the Bain report and Dasra organization together release a report called India Philanthropy Report every year. And the
Okay.
2022 report says that private funding to nonprofits can increase by at least 2.5 to 3.5 times what they are right now.
Okay. Okay.
Because we effectively need 13% of GDP to go into nonprofit sector if we
Okay.
want to achieve the development goals, but currently we have only 7% on average, right?
Okay.
So that is probably the way forward for us in the Indian nonprofit
So
sector.
these are the high net worth individuals, huh? Who need to
Yes,
step up, step up in terms of what they're contributing, right?
exactly, exactly.
Okay. Are they based out of India, or they are someone who's living outside India? I mean, I'm just curious to know this. This high net worth individual.
A lot of them are based out of India. So if you look at the Infosys co-founders, I mean, they're all based out of India. You look at Piramal Foundation, that their founders are based out of India. Godrej is, they run their own family foundation. They're based out of
Okay.
India. So as you move forward, you're seeing more and more philanthropists in India sort of give back.
Okay. Okay.
To also answer that question in a different way, Manhar, a lot of Indians contribute to religious organizations as
Yes.
philanthropy.
Yes. Yes.
And a lot of money goes from there into the social sector,
No,
right?
but there is no way of accounting for that, right?
We
Like
don't know
contribution.
exactly. So this is all based on people who work on the ground. And we
Yes.
know that the religious organizations do their own charity work, etc., right? And that also counts as investment back into the development sector. But
Yes.
now what's happening is people are consciously choosing what non-profit organization they want to put the money in because they're concerned about education, girls, hygiene or health,
Yes.
or a lot of these problems, right? So people are really concerned about it and they know more about it these days. So that's making a difference.
Okay. Yeah. So given some insight on the funding part. So Mehek, since you've been a practitioner, over the last 10 years, so and you have seen firsthand, the impact, the development sector, has had due to the funding. So if you can talk more about this, Mehek.
Yeah, sure. Very honestly, most organizations and professionals struggle to answer this impact question, right? Like, what has your impact been? Because it's
Yes.
just so complex. And it's really hard to quantify as well. But, if I look at it from like a historical perspective, if I look at the last 50, 60 years that India's had, I would say there are a lot of like bright spots that have existed. Like polio eradication is a clear example,
Yes. Yes.
where you saw various NGOs, the government, people sort of come together, community workers sort of come together towards ensuring that polio is eradicated, in like a proper campaign manner. You saw celebrities come in as well. Or even if I look at a lot of different policies that are currently enacted in India, whether it's the right to education, whether it was the right to information, all of these have largely come into play. Even Narega, for that matter, have come into play because of the fact that the NGOs were able to push for these kind of reforms.
Yes.
So overall, if I look at the sector and the kind of impact it's made, there's a lot that can be attributed to the in terms of success, right? And overall, if I look at India, poverty rates have improved, where the rates were at 21% and now they've dropped to 13%. So I would say it is because of the collective effort between NGOs, the government, the private sector, all of it coming together.
Yes, but a lot needs to be done.
Oh yeah, for
There's a
sure. There's
lot of
still a
yeah.
long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So given that, Arvind, you are based out of University of Chicago, which has some of the most renowned professors working in the field of development economics, right? So given your interactions with them, what sort of is the reason why India is lagging behind in the development indicators. Arvind.
Mhm. Sure, Manhar. So I think when we talk about development indicators in India, we should be careful that different parts of the country has always had different levels of human development over the years,
Yes,
historically speaking.
yes,
The South, on average, has been performing definitely much better than the northern parts of the country when it comes
when
to
it
human.
comes to education, right?
So, to be more precise, the Human Development Index,
Yeah,
in which India currently ranks 132 out of 191 countries, is calculated based on three factors. Are
yes,
you living a healthy life?
yes,
What is the level of education in the country, average?
yes,
And a decent standard of living, which is measured in terms of the GDP or GNI, gross national income per capita.
yes,
And the education level is measured using average years of schooling and also expected years of schooling you're supposed to do.
yes,
So you can see that basically life expectancy and education and the gross national income
yes.
together decide the Human Development Index as of now. So taking these indicators, right,
Uh,
what we see is that two factors. I mean, people will talk about a lot of reasons why India is lagging in development indicators, but broadly speaking, it comes to two. One, access to quality in public services. You can call it in terms of health, be
yes,
it hospitals, primary healthcare center availability, or specialized hospitals for serious problems in rural
yes, yes,
areas.
yes.
Second is achieving that quality at the scale of this country, right?
Yeah.
So one problem is, are you even able to achieve that kind of quality at one place, in one state or in a few
Uh,
states?
uh,
The second is, now how do you scale up this quality across the country, right?
okay.
Now, the reason is because let's take the example of education only, right? India's expected level of education, when they calculate it, it's around 11 point some years,
Uh,
years of schooling.
uh,
But the actual average number of years of schooling that people kids in India have is 6.7 years.
okay.
And this happens because people go to primary school, around 97% of eligible children go to primary school. But when it comes to, let's say, 9th standard to 12th standard, right?
Yes.
Over there, the school enrollment falls very badly.
Okay.
A lot of kids drop out of the school, particularly girls drop out of school at that time. Now,
Okay.
because of that lower education level, you have issues about having children,
Yes.
early marriage, not being able to participate in the labor market for women, right?
Yes.
So all these issues together has made a situation where uh, the structural problems facing us
Yes.
uh, is the reason why the development indicators are lagging. And that shows up, and that has been really amplified during the pandemic, as you
Yes.
very well, right?
Yes.
Uh, so it's definitely a deeper problem that needs a complex set of interventions in over a long period of time if we really want to catch back on the human development indicators.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word, structural, issues. So
Mhm.
I would bring in Sanjukta now. You know, Sanjukta, you know, could you, elaborate on, what exactly makes up, these structural issues in the Indian, social sector?
Okay, that's a very nice segue. Before I answer that, how are we doing on time?
No, no, we have 10 minutes.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So if we talk about some of the structural issues, we can list them down. Organizational development. We have some possible solutions could be, allocating better resources, the organization itself, hiring appropriate talent, funding. Then there's a lack of coherence, coordination, cooperation, adaptation, and inability to predict long term. So
Yes.
across the various stakeholders. So I
Yes.
did say a lot of words. So let me give you an example to, make this point more understandable.
Hmm.
So in the North India, which the northern crop is wheat-based crop, right?
Yes.
However, in the last few decades, there's been an excess production of wheat, and the excess production has been rising every year. So the government felt that we need to be putting a lot of effort in producing wheat, which is not required. So let's just motivate the farmers to move towards the production of other crops away from wheat. So a
Yes.
lot of farmers adopted rice as an alternative.
Yes.
It is it is a crop which is actually has a higher price in the market. It's a lot of reasons rice seems like a good alternative. Now,
Yes.
but rice is a very water intensive crop, and it's primarily grown in the southern region, primarily because we get more rainfall in the south than the northern belt.
Yes.
So there was an increase in water consumption, which came from the natural resources. Punjab has these lovely 5 rivers. We talk about the
Yeah.
five
Yeah.
rivers,
Yeah.
five
Yes.
rivers. And so a lot of water came from those sources. However, due to using a lot of these water sources and the huge increase in the water consumption for agricultural purposes, specifically for rice growth, the growing
Yeah.
of rice, these natural resources started declining in the state.
Okay.
And there was a serious crunch of water. So then the government policy was that, fine, you want to produce rice, great, but you restrict the rice production during the rainy season only, when the possibility of natural rainfall or natural sources is higher. So that,
Okay.
substituting from the rivers or the underground water for rainfall water.
Yes.
So now that's the problem which comes where now, so we have solved one problem, right? We had two problems. We initially started with the excess wheat problem. We solved that with the rice production. Now
Yes.
we have because of rice production, we have this water shortage issue. So now we solve the water shortage issue. Do it during the rainy season. That's it.
Yeah.
You're done. So now the other problem comes that during the rainy season, once they are done harvesting, the farmers have a very short time to prepare their field for the winter harvest.
Okay.
Initially, they were doing this over the summer months, and they'll have a couple of months to harvest, clear the field, till the land, and then be prepared for the next cycle. Now they have around 15 days to less than a month's time. So that's like less than half the time that they have before. So what do? The farmers need, because that's what they're getting the income from. They can just leave the land barren for the season, right? So they need to prepare it quickly. And to do that, they burn their fields. And I think you know where I'm getting at. So, every time in October, we have this huge pollution thing in Delhi, talking about crop burning and all. But why it's happening? Because the farmers need to prepare their field for the next season. Otherwise, we can face a food shortage. These farmers will have an income issue. I mean, there are other problems as well.
Exactly.
But when you're forming that first policy, you did not think about the new policy, new problem. So this is an example of lack of coordination and long-term planning in policy framework. You're trying to solve one problem, but you're not thinking that you're creating a new problem, and thus we're just going on in circles again and again.
So there are these externalities,
right?
Involved.
Yeah. So some other problems could be like time factor. We don't get time factor. We don't really get a chance to see what's going to happen. What is the impact of our current intervention? In some cases, we don't have the resources. Like a lot of organizations or programs which are running, they don't have the resources to run the program for 10 years. To see if today, if I educate my mothers, will that have an impact on the family in the future?
Yeah. So Sanjukta, thank you for explaining it in such a detailed manner. So moving on, to the next question, which is linked to what Sanjukta has explained. So there are a number of other challenges facing the development sector in India, right? And so Arvind, could you talk about those challenges in about 2 minutes?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
We need to wind up.
So sure. So I think I would say the most pressing problem is lack of clear and consistent goals for the long term.
Okay.
If you want to achieve any kind of long-term, stable, robust improvement in your human development indices, you need a clear and consistent goal. You need the right kind of, the theory of change that can actually achieve this goal. You need the legal framework, the regulations and policies to support you from the government side. And then you need people with the right kind of talent to
Uh,
actually implement your solutions, right?
yeah.
And finally, you also need the society to come together and support these interventions or these policies.
Yes.
And underlying all of this is a basic problem that we have not internalized the scientific best practices within our nonprofit sector.
Okay.
And this can also be possibly due to, like, the sector is very fragmented due to geography, language barrier, cultural issues, and everything else.
Yeah.
So as you can see, the problems we face is a lot in very high dimensional way.
Yes.
But I think focusing on clear and consistent long-term planning might actually be a good solution to this.
Yes. So, and one of the most important problem, which we will talk about in greater details in the podcast to come, is the problem related to data, right?
Yes.
And so this is where I would bring all three of you to talk very briefly about this problem before we end this conversation. So I would start with Arvind, you.
Sure, Manhar. So when it comes to data, I think we can summarize the problem simply that there is lack of science-based decision making on what data to collect
Yeah.
and why are we collecting that data, right? So the data, typically data or information that we collect, it's used in all stages of a nonprofit's work or a project, right? It's
Yes.
in the design stage, the implementation stage. Are you monitoring your project correctly, using the right indicators? Are you able to evaluate your project with and without a randomized study that very few organizations can afford? And
Yes.
finally, are you able to use this information back as a feedback transparently to improve your program, right?
Yes.
So I think I would briefly say that we need more science-based decisions on what data to collect and why are we collecting it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Sanjukta, I would like you now to talk very briefly about this.
Okay, so a lot of the issues that we were talking about can be addressed you if we have appropriate data to solve the to see, have data to understand the beneficiaries, have data to of previous knowledge or previous research in the field.
Yes.
So but now the question is that, like, if you know that problem, having data can solve the problem, then why can't we do it? Collection of data, how to collect data. These are the questions which starts popping in your head. So
Yes.
these questions is what we need to start focusing on to understand the life cycle of data, from the thinking of why we are collecting data, to what data, then how we collect it, and towards the end, using the data to understand what's happening in the sector and use it for improving the policy.
Yes.
This is the actual, the roadmap that we all need to think about. And that's what I feel like we can explore more in detail in our subsequent podcast.
And I think among us, Mehek, being a practitioner for the last 10 years, knows, this in a lot of greater depth. Yeah, Mehek. Yeah, I would like you to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenges that Arvind and Sanjukta have sort of highlighted are pretty bang on. For somebody who's been a practitioner, I would say that it's really hard to make impact. There are so many externalities that are out there.
Yeah.
I think what I want to be able to talk about is the fact that it's really critical for us to collect the data, which will help us sort of decide what to do and how to do it. Data, when collected effectively, can help us ensure that we don't make the mistakes that we have been making. And
Yeah.
that might just make things easier. So, everything that they're saying in terms of why are we collecting that data, how do we look at that cycle, I think is very, very critical. And I would love to have more people sort of come to us, talk to us about it. If they have some answers, we would be more than happy to discuss. And then, as we talk about things in our subsequent podcast, we'd be more happy to go into deep,
Yeah. Yeah.
go into depth about this.
Yeah, go into depth, with greater, clarity about, each and every issue. Yes, and yeah, so I think I would, wind up the conversation now, and I would, give last 2 minutes to Sanjukta to wind, if she's interested, to summarize the conversation. Sanjukta. in 2 minutes, before we,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, to wind up, so we started off talking about the development sector, development economics, what it means. Then Mehek beautifully explained what the development sector is. So a lot of us have an idea that when we think of NGOs, we have this image of this one person with a kurta and a jhola and walking in villages and, talking
Yeah,
to people and trying to explain them situations. But she was very,
the image that comes to my mind is that of John Rees, who is a
yeah,
professor in Jharkhand, right? Eating
I
his
think,
lunches with,
right.
yes.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, that John Dress is the first thing you think about. But Mehek showed beautifully that it's so much more. It is a lot more. There are governments, there are big companies, there are philanthropists. All these piece of people are here in the sector participating actively.
Yes.
Then we talked about the policy domains, which is basically everything and anything under the sun when it comes to the social sector. Anything which can improve our society, that's a policy domain. Some are more important because those are more prevalent challenges. Some just not important enough because we have bigger challenges to focus on.
Yeah, the idea of this podcast is to actually identify, those challenging,
Right.
challenges, right? Yeah.
Mm.
So I think I would now wind up, this conversation with all three of you. Okay, Sanjukta, Arvind,
Okay.
and Mehek, yeah, yeah. Thank you, for
Thank you.
giving us some peep into, the development sector in the context of India. Thank you to all three of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Manu,
you.
for this
Yeah.
opportunity.
Thanks, Nana.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us. I hope you had as much fun as we did talking
I
about
also
it.
had a lot of fun, and I am looking to have a lot more fun in the podcast to come, which will talk, cover these areas in greater detail, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.